What's up, everybody? Welcome in to you could say, long-awaited edition, at
Mm,
least a week-long awaited edition
right.
of SSPN. Ethan's back from vacation. I'm Jude, and we're here to talk some Spurs power forwards today, Ethan. But before we get into that, it's ironic that our last episode, we ended the episode off being like, we did find out that there were some articles coming out that Keldon Johnson is still going to wear number 3 for the Spurs. And naturally, the next day, or I don't know if it was the next day, but it
I
was,
think it was. I
yeah,
think it was the next
I'm
day.
pretty sure it was too. It is announced that Keldon Johnson will be wearing number 0 and Chris Paul will be keeping CP3. But
Mm.
with that being said, my guy, we still said that if there was one other number, if we had a prediction for another number that Keldon Johnson would wear, it would be the number he wore for the Austin Spurs, and that was number 0. So before we get in to Jeremy Sochan and Sandro Mamukelashvili, what are your thoughts on KJ0 this season in
Mm.
SA?
KJ0 has a nice ring to it. That's the first time I actually heard that out loud. I think it's great. I think it's good for him. It's kind of a fresh start for him in a way to wear number 0 in a new role for him officially at the start of this year, which will be fun. And it also connects to his favorite player growing up, which is Russell Westbrook, who wore number 0 obviously in OKC, and I think he wore it. Did he wear it everywhere actually?
I don't think it was everywhere. I
Almost.
think he
Yeah,
did wear.
he
I
wore
think
4 in Washington.
yeah, but I think he wore 0 in Houston.
Regardless,
Right.
number 0 for Russell Westbrook, who plays kind of similar aggressive style of basketball. So it makes sense, and I think it's even better that we get CP3 because that sounds just right, Jude.
Yeah.
Anything else would have felt strange.
And the other thing is, this is most likely just going to be a 1-year thing with Chris Paul.
Right.
So Keldon may go back to number 3 after this season. But another thing, when we first talked about this potential number change, and I know this may be a little bit into the voodoo type stuff, not something that's necessarily tangible, but
Mhm.
a lot of us probably, that a lot of Spurs fans might feel like there's some untapped potential in Keldon Johnson. And maybe just this number change could be, a nice reset for him this season to really bounce back and come into what we hope he can be.
I like that. I like that.
But any other thoughts on KJ0 and Chris Paul still being CP3?
I think it makes sense.
Right. I completely agree there too. But Wemby's Castle, already in the chat, always in the chat. He says, I might be in the minority, but I believe power forward is a strength this season. He sends in another comment as I mention him. And he says, Sochan, Barnes, Mamu, interchangeable, different skill sets. All 3 IQs are high. I definitely get what he's getting at there. We're going to have to see how the lineups play out. We mentioned in the last episode that, there's definitely a lot of switchability with Harrison Barnes. He's somebody that we could see at the 4. We probably expect him to be in the starting lineup because of his spacing and intangibles that he would just bring on top of having Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison, and Wemby, and really the only non-shooter on the court, you could say. But he was also somebody who was still above 30% from 3 last year.
Yeah.
In Jeremy Sochan. And maybe if he takes another step forward, he could be around that 35% mark. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but the bigger point is with Harrison Barnes' spacing as well as his IQ, having 2 veterans in the starting lineup with those guys, we definitely see the appeal there and kind of like that. But you never know. Maybe Harrison Barnes would be the 4 off the bench, and that's just what Pop wants to do. And maybe Keldon's in the starting lineup. We'll have to see after training camp.
He's done it both ways, different teams, different situations. So I wouldn't be surprised either way. Both sides have positive, both sides have negatives. I think just you and I, our preference is probably him starting at the 3 spot.
Right, for sure. And I think the bigger reason I bring that up too is because in our last episode, we talked about
About
Harrison
him. Yeah.
Barnes as the 3. So we won't be talking about him today. But the other 2 guys in Wemby's Castle comment
Mhm.
we will be talking about is Jeremy Sochan and Sandro Mamukelashvili. So let's just jump into it, man. What are your strengths and weaknesses for Jeremy Sochan going into year 3 as an NBA player?
His strengths will be what have been his strengths really since we drafted him. Number 1 being defense, number 2 being versatility, and number 3 just being high IQ play. Those are things that he came into the league with that I think he will continue to build on. There are all the advanced stats saying that he is one of the best perimeter wing defenders in the NBA. That's what the advanced metrics say. That's not just eye test, but If you're like Jude and I, and you base a lot of your takes on the eye test because we literally watch every single minute of every single game, you can clearly tell that he is a above average defender, a high level defender. Maybe not a point of attack defender like a Stefan Castle, but a guy that just has a lot of IQ on that side of the basketball, as that side of the court. Excuse me. And that's been his strengths from the beginning. High IQ level of offense as well, as far as being a connective piece, not necessarily hunting for his shots, but also, taking them when they come to him. And I think we saw that in moments. We saw him improve as a 3-point shooter. I know it's still not crazy numbers at 31% on the year, but that was way up from 24 in
Right.
his rookie season, and on about 100 more attempts on the season as well. So I think that will continue to improve for him. Weaknesses, I think, is still going to just be putting the ball on the floor, being a ball handler. But at the same time, I say that I don't think that will be expected from him this year as much as it
Right.
was last year, because we have more primary ball handlers with Chris Paul, with Stefan Castle, Devin Vassell's emergence as a ball handler in the pick and roll situations. So he will be relegated really to a role that is more capable, more built around his skill set. I think it'll be reminiscent of what Draymond Green does. I think that's what we were talking about when we drafted him, is he is a more athletic Draymond Green, and we kind of got away from that a little bit by
Mhm.
playing him at point guard, and then just by the shape of the roster. So I
Mhm.
think we will kind of put him back into his rightful place in a way, and that will allow him to blossom as a connective piece offensively, a floor spacer, and just a really high level defender. And if I wanted to say an opportunity that I want him to take hold of, I would say as a rebounder. We have
Mhm.
still yet to see him be a dominant rebounder. I think he had 6 boards a game last year. He had 5 as a rookie. Like, those are solid numbers for like a 6'8" power forward, which is what he is. But I'd like to see him get some like
Yeah.
crazy rebounding numbers, especially with Wemby being what he is and having to defend along the perimeter as well as being like a help defender blocking shots. He needs to be a physical presence on the boards.
Yeah, I think that's, when you're talking about his rebounding, that's something that I'm going to get into myself. And, you were doing the comparison there for Draymond, but another thing I was thinking about, and this was the other comparison we made for old Jeremy, especially his rookie season with all the different hair colors, was
Rodman.
Dennis Rodman.
Yep.
So kind of, obviously saying a mixture of those two guys is, a very high expectation level, but you know what I mean? We're not talking about it necessarily in that extreme for a 21-year-old Jeremy Sohan, but
Right.
in the sense that, you can be someone who is connective, can pass like a Draymond, but also someone who's going out there and fighting for boards, having cleanup duty. He was one of the few players in the NBA, I forget the exact number last season, with a 30-point game and a 15 rebound point game. I think he had 2 of those throughout the year, and he was one of like 2 or 3 players in the entire league who even did that last season. I know
Yeah.
the context is different, but that's Jeremy Sohan at his best right there. Now, I'm going to repeat a lot of the stuff you said, but I'm going to read off my notes here for strengths and weaknesses. So the first thing I wrote down for strengths was defense, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what you started out with as well. The second thing I wrote down was cleanup duty.
Mhm.
Another thing that we just touched on. You mentioned his connectiveness. That was another adjective I had written down. Swiss Army knife, just the way that he can do a lot of different things. And, when you mentioned his ball handling, we even saw last year when we moved him back to power forward, you still
Mhm.
saw him take it up the floor, after getting a rebound, or even sometimes he would just do it in general, depending on, whatever the set was. And when his ball handling duties were lessened, for lack of a better term, you even saw, more flashes of his passing ability. And that's the next thing I had written down, which was pass vision. I'm not saying, that we need to throw him back into that point guard role, because we obviously saw how that went last season. But at the same time, when you talk about his ball handling duties being lessened even more this season, that could also open some more opportunities for him, in the few chances that he does bring the ball up the floor, because everybody's going to be so focused on, everybody on the other team's defense will be focused on all the other guys in those situations, that, maybe there could be some opportunities there for Jeremy to even showcase, a little tighter handle if you worked on that in the
Mhm.
offseason. But again, with what you said, that's not what we're going to be asking him to do. And that, I think, is the main thing that's going to potentially elevate his offensive play this season. Um, but going back to his strengths, crashing the glass defensively and offensively. just playing physical and with a motor. This may not be the prettiest thing, and maybe it's not something we want him to do all the time, but I got to write it down. Forcing baskets on the inside. How many times did we see him just back down somebody and force a basket? And yes, it's not the prettiest thing of all time. And sometimes he missed and had to get his own rebound and put it back again. But that ties into the last thing I had written down, and that's just playing tough.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to give him credit for those things. Yes, they may not be the prettiest things basketball wise, but there's a lot of guys who play finesse, like Malachi Branham, who we talked about, who doesn't do those things at all.
Right. That's a great point, and it establishes a physical presence. And if we're going to be the young team, we can't be the soft team, and that's where he comes in.
Yeah. Wemby's Castle says, I personally see Jeremy Sochan being the best rebounder on the team outside of Wemby, but if Bassey stays healthy, I could see a lot more Wemby-Bassey lineups this season, making Bassey the second best rebounder. So if Bassey plays a lot, I definitely can see his logic there, but Jeremy is going to be at least one of those top 3 rebounders on the team. That'll be the expectation, I would think.
Agreed.
Okay, we got to mention this. I feel bad laughing.
I didn't realize he
Did
got
you
to
see this?
correct
You
or
missed
anything.
it? Yeah. Yeah. So Alejandro Morales says, rip Jeremy's Porsche. I don't think it was like confirmed, but it was pretty obviously Jeremy in the video. Yeah, he would. I didn't see the exact crash, but somebody was like, I don't know, on some San Antonio road. I don't know if it was 210 or I don't know. Why am I thinking 210? That's probably the wrong
I-10?
number. There is I-10. What's the other one? 281? No.
281 is,
Okay,
410?
410. That's what I was thinking. 410, 281, 35, whatever it might have been. Yeah, it was pretty obviously Jeremy with a jacked up Porsche because it was like a 6'8" guy with, with cornrows, and it was just,
Yep,
it
that's
was,
him.
you couldn't see his face, but it was pretty obvious that it was him. So rip Jeremy's Porsche. Unfortunate, but I think the NBA bag will take care of it soon enough.
Likely, yes. I think Wemby's Castle's comment there is actually a really good point too that neither of us talked about, which is his Jeremy's ability to get back a lot more backdoor cuts and just off the ball movement baskets because of the addition of Chris Paul will also be prevalent in his game. And I'm not saying that he didn't do that
Right.
last year, but it wasn't like a strong suit necessarily. This year, I think we'll see a lot more of that.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll probably scheme up a lot more.
Mhm.
One, because we're just running more actual sets with Chris Paul, and
Mhm.
two, because of Chris Paul and even like other guys like Harrison Barnes on the floor, we just have the competency, to open
Mhm.
that up.
I'm not comparing these players
Right.
necessarily, but think about the schemes that the Denver Nuggets are able to run with Aaron Gordon sitting in the dunker spot and a high pick
Yes.
and roll game between Jamal Murray and Jokic. I think it'll be similar to that, where he's going to get a lot of lobs from Wemby, a lot of bounce passes for just like underhand layups, a lot of just easy, wide open baskets.
When you were talking about him cutting to the basket, the first thing I was thinking about was in the dunker spot,
Yep.
that exact Aaron Gordon role, which I think we've talked about a little bit before,
Mhm.
kind of over the summer. But back to Jeremy, just overall, because I didn't finish this weaknesses, ball handling. As much as, I mentioned that other caveat earlier, still ball handling, shooting, as much as we have seen the increase, we're happy to see those incremental increases. Hopefully we see more. That's still something we got to point at. Self creation, just in
Yeah.
general. I gave him credit for forcing baskets on the inside, but that's kind of because he's not able to create off the dribble right now. That's another thing that we hope to continue to see grow. And then the last thing I had written down, because there were some memories that stuck out in my head a little bit of this, just lulled to sleep defensively sometimes.
Mm.
And that can lead to a missed rotation or getting blown by. Obviously, the past 2 seasons have their circumstances that, are important context. But there were some times that just mentally, he'd have some lapses. He's also 21. Like, that's the other thing we've got to remember. Like, that can happen from time to time with young players, but
Mhm.
just staying locked in all the time so that all of his, defensive strengths that he does have, are just always being utilized on every possession. And that's something that, just takes time with reps with young players. Like, not everybody's going to come in with the Kobe mentality, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. I think the same can be said for offensively too. I think there were times where he kind of got lost in the offensive scheme and like, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? And that's where we saw the messy plays, the turnovers, or just getting in somebody's way.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's pretty much everything I had written down for Jeremy. Is there anything else that you have on him before we move on to Mamu?
No, so I'm still really excited about his upside. As much as we talk about Wemby
Right.
being the franchise and Stefan Castle coming in, Devin becoming, who he is, Jeremy gets lost on the shuffle a lot and he gets a lot of hate because he's only shooting 31% from three. And that's what everyone gets, their cross stuck in. But he's still a guy with a lot of versatility and a lot of potential to be an all-star level player on both sides of the ball, not just as a defensive specialist.
And on top of all of that, how many Spurs, have started since their rookie season? I know the circumstances were different, but I
True.
mean, there's not a lot of players like that. We've seen Pop talk glowingly about Jeremy and his potential, especially, in the 2022 season before Victor. And he still did at times last year. But, before Victor was on the roster, a lot of us were like, hey, maybe this guy has the highest potential on the team.
For sure. It was a conversation.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize the same thing that you did. As much as we may have our criticisms here and we're trying to look at this objectively for a 21-year-old Jeremy Sochan, I'm still very high on him. I'm really glad he's on the team. And kind of as Wemby's Castle says down here, in a CP3, Vassell, Barnes, Sochan, Wemby lineup, crazy thing is none have to find a PG to push tempo off of a defensive rebound. Okay.
Mm.
I see what you're saying. That was actually the wrong comment that I pulled up there. Um,
That's
let
a
me
good
go.
point, though.
Yeah, it is for sure. Um, hmm. Here we go. This is what it said. And we'll go back to this question as well. He was responding to McLean Garrett's comment earlier, but he says he sees a top 10 defense. We'll get into our thoughts on that here in a second. But still, Castle, Sochan, Wemby alone make it a top 15. I don't know if I'd jump that far, but what I will say is that Jeremy Sochan is a pillar, for our defensive potential moving forward. Like, I'm very happy to have him next to Victor, and I think it's a really good fit for the modern NBA. Maybe we'll be proven wrong, but that's how I feel right now.
For sure. And how quickly we become a top 10 defense, I think, just entirely depends on chemistry.
Yeah.
That's going to be the thing. The communication and chemistry amongst the team. How long will that take? For OKC, it took like a year, right? They brought in one guy, and then suddenly they were one of the better defensive teams. But other teams, it takes a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And just to answer this comment, because our guy McLean Garrett was in here earlier, he said, "Glad to be here, fellas. Question: Do you think our team defense could be a top 15 in the league? Personally, I think the addition of Chris and Harrison will be huge defensively."
Mm. Yeah, I think kind of what I just said kind of answered the question. It just depends on chemistry, but I do think Chris and Harrison, like you mentioned, help speed that along because of their veteran presence, because they've done it before at a high level on great defensive teams. Historically, they know what it takes. So them just being involved and not taking any BS from the younger guys and being mentors and teachers will go a long way, because we do have the skill set. We have the length, versatility at all
Hmm.
positions to do it. Physically, if this was 2K, it would be effortless. But unfortunately,
Right.
they're real people, and there will be a learning curve.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on that, just to kind of answer that question, is I'll say I think we'll at least be top 20. I don't know if we'll get to top 15, but I think Wemby's numbers alone,
Yeah.
as much as I agree, CP3 and Harrison are going to help a ton out too, just with their veteran experience and their communication, as we've harped on. And it seems like the last 4 or 5 episodes that we've done. I think Wemby's numbers alone, because of just how insane they could potentially be with his second year jump,
Yep.
will at least put us in between 20 and 15. But I think there's a chance that maybe we could, slip into that 15 spot. And maybe I'm underestimating it, with Wemby's second year jump. I mean, I don't want to underestimate or put a cap on anything he can do. And with the performance we saw in the Olympics and, just the motivation he has in general, man, like when I saw today on Twitter, I actually haven't gotten 2K yet. That's a confession.
Ooh.
But I saw that Victor's block rating was a 99.
I did not know that. That's
And the thing was, like, yes, we're Spurs fans, yes, we're biased, but I'm like, that's actually not that outrageous.
no,
And
it's
when I
not.
consider that to this conversation, I know that's a video game and this is real life. Again, with the ability that he has, I'm not going to put a cap on anything. And I could see us slipping maybe in to, I would say more 10 to 20. I'd probably, to be just, me wanting to keep myself at a balanced place, I'd say 15 to 20. But, with his ability, who knows what could happen.
I think what's funny is he is a 99 block, but in 2K, a 99 block is just not fair because it's 2K, and so he's gonna get like 10 blocks a game.
Oh my goodness. Facts. Facts. Two Clutch C also in the comments. He says, "What's up, fellas?" Um, blah 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 says, "I expect a big year for Sochan." Um, and yeah, we appreciate all you guys being in here. But let's get into Sandro Mamukelashvili, Ethan. What are your strengths and weaknesses for who could potentially be the Spurs' backup four?
What's funny is the strengths for Sandro are pretty much exactly the same as the strengths for Jeremy Sohan, and the only difference is Jeremy's a better defender. He's a little bit more versatile of a defender, better athlete, obviously, has more upside. But Mamu, I think, is a slightly better shooter. He's a better handler of the basketball. I think he is a more capable, like, just like take a guy off a dribble, make a play for somebody else in the corner. You know what I mean? Like a Boris Diaw type,
Mhm.
more so than Jeremy. Um, and Sandro, I think, is in a place in his career where he's not going to make as many mistakes as Jeremy. He's going to be level headed. He's going to make less turnovers. He's going to make the right play, and he's not going to fall asleep on either side of the ball. Now, why Jeremy is better? Because Jeremy's way more athletic. Jeremy is a way better versatile defender. He can guard 1 through 4 pretty much, whereas Mamu can probably pretty much only guard 3 or 4, sometimes a small ball 5, maybe, and that's asking a lot from him, which is why he's obviously the backup. But I expect him to just continue to be that. Just continue to be that. Maybe have some more efficient shooting numbers from us, especially with better players around him. And I think more of a steady role for Mamu coming into this year, where last year he really didn't play all that much in the first 70% of the season. This season, I expect him to get meaningful minutes at that backup 4 spot for sure.
We better if we got rid of Don Barlow.
Darn right, Jude. Couldn't have said it better myself.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm really interested to see. I'd really like to see him as the main backup four.
Me
That's
too.
why we're kind of framing this, and we had Harrison Barnes as the starting three. I totally understand if they go a different route. And at the end of the day, that kind of ties back into our Julian point. Like, if Mamu does end up being a third string four, I mean, we've seen how that's played out for us when we've had injuries. As much as the past 2 years, we were 22-60. We've seen him come in and make plays, later in the season. I mean, even again, I'll go back to the 2022 season, like basically taking on Nikola Jokic and taking over a game late in the year. And even last year's win
Yeah.
against the Nuggets, as much as that was much more Wemby going off, he still made some plays in that game as well. But going back to just his strengths and weaknesses in general, creativity offensively was the first thing that I wrote down.
Mm,
Ball handling, and that's kind of different than Jeremy. As much as
yeah.
they do have a lot of strengths, they also have some things that, where probably defensively, I'll get into that a little bit. That might be more of a weakness for Mamu. The
Mm,
things offensively that Jeremy struggles at, like putting the ball on the floor, being a consistent shooter, those are things that Mamu definitely has a step on him there, I would say. So I put down shooting as well. Not saying he's going to be like a lights out, a 45% Doug McDermott type of guy, but he's somebody who definitely has a good shot. And if you leave him open, he can knock it down. And we've even seen him hit some step backs from time to time. Mamu's got some sauciness to him
he
sometimes with
does.
the ball in his hands. Sometimes that can turn into turnovers, but I love the potential in a young player like Mamu. As much as he is kind of older as well, I want to say he's 24. We can look that up to confirm that. So I get,
25.
okay, there you go, a little bit even ahead of that. So I definitely get the points that you were making earlier about that, but I also think that he's not too old in the sense that he can't grow in certain areas. And then height and length. That's the other thing I wrote down.
Yeah.
Just being 6'10", but he's somebody who also plays the three for the Georgia national team, and that ties into his versatility overall. So those were my strengths for him. Those are mainly all offensively, but the height and length, still can be a factor for sure on defense. And this is going to be basically his third year with the Spurs now. I think we might have picked him up mid-season in
We did.
22. Yeah, so it's not a full 3 years, but he's been with the organization, during 3 seasons. So I think that, again, going through another training camp with Pop.
Mhm.
And just being in the Spurs defensive system, as well as the communication aspect we keep hitting on. If we do that on the bench as well, that will also be something that's going to help us out a lot overall. There's still some things that he can do at 6'10", 240 defensively with that frame is what I'm trying to say. And he can switch better. He's a better perimeter defender. Maybe than people give him credit for. There's still some times where he can get burnt, but he's somebody who can move fluidly to the perimeter defensively, just like he can on offense. And then weaknesses, I put strength. There's just some times where he can get out physicaled on the boards.
Mm.
With that being said, he still had a few double doubles as well. Now, I think the context of those rebounds are a little bit different. But I have seen some times, where he's tried to, kind of fight on the interior in the paint, and he's gotten a little bit roughed up. I'll leave it that way.
Mm.
As much as he is a tall guy, and you look at the weight, and he's definitely got a good frame for a power forward. He's not the most bulky guy. I'll put it that way. Defensive IQ, ISO defense, and then the last thing I had written down, and this kind of ties into what I was just talking about, being sturdy inside the paint as a defender. But that's another thing, another year in the strength and conditioning program. He was kind of, yes, he was with the Bucks, but he was kind of, hopping around the G League there, for a little bit, just being like on a real NBA contract going into a season like, hey, you're most likely going to be a part of our rotation. I think all of those things, when you put that together, maybe there's some hope there that, there can be some physical traits that are added in an NBA strength and conditioning program. That's kind of what I was trying to get at there. But those are my strengths and weaknesses for Mamu.
I agree with all of them. And one point that we both mentioned that I just want to allude to, because I just know some guy's going to bring it up in the comments later. Technically last year, Sandro shot less of a percentage from three than Jeremy Sochan.
Wow.
He shot 29.7 and Jeremy shot like 30.1. However, in his previous, he's been in the league 4 years. He went 42%, 22%, 35 his first season with the Spurs, and then last year at 29.7. But he just looks like he has a better shot. And I feel like in my head, like remembering the games, like it's fluid. I feel like they go down at a higher clip. I guess he just needs to shoot higher volume because he only got up 1.5 a game last year, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy was even, well, this would maybe kind of go into that argument. I think he was shooting more than that last season. But also, Jeremy was getting consistent minutes throughout the season.
Also true.
Which, in all the context of those other 4 years, like Mamu's never really had that. I think anybody, if you put their shots next to each other, like if it was a two-face screen like the one we have right here, it would be pretty obvious, okay, who looks like they have the better jump shot. And Ethan, as much as, stats are great at times and they can definitely tell you some things, the advanced metrics, there's also the actual basketball. And that's what we try to pay attention to here.
We try. It is hard, but we try.
July 26th says odds of Mamu being a part of the second unit. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. I think really, I don't even think this, Pop has probably done some thinking about this, and I'm sure the coaching staff has, but I don't think this is really all going to be concrete or played out until training camp. So I think we got to wait and see what happens. But Ethan and I feel like if we had to bet on like yes or no, we would say yes.
I think he deserves it. I mean, every time he comes in the game, he makes a difference. I really don't understand why last year he wasn't consistent in his minutes. So this year, there's really no excuse not to play him.
Yeah, I think the consensus of most Spurs fans would probably be at the end of the season, he kind of earned that role.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why, as much as I joked about Don Barlow earlier, that's another reason why we moved on from him. Just bluntly, Mamu outperformed him. As much as I love my boy Tom Beasley, and he's coming back one day.
So is Drew Eubanks.
Absolutely.
Good luck in Utah, Drew.
He's got the signed poster is still up on the wall right here for Eubanks.
If we ever do trade for Lauri Markkanen this season, we got to get Drew thrown in there somehow just to make the money work.
3-way trade.
Well, he's in Utah.
Well, no, but with the Hawks, so we can get Barlow too.
Give up all of our picks.
Oh my goodness. Wemby's Castle sending in a super chat. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate that. Like so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
He says, here are NBA awards: Defensive Player of the Year, Wemby; Most Improved Player of the Year, Jeremy; Rookie of the Year, Castle.
Mm,
Okay, you know what I will say? I think it's going to be tough for Jeremy because of just the crowded crowd, but I
yeah.
don't think these are actually that, and I think probably for Castle too, just because of stats. But I don't think these are that crazy. Um, Overall, I will say that, especially the first one. I think that's got to happen this year. There's probably should have won it last year, but we won't rehash that.
Mm.
Spurs finish the season 42-40, make the play-in, winning, going to the playoffs as the 8th seed. I really hope so, Wemby's Castle. And once again, we truly, truly appreciate your super chat.
Yeah, if all that happens, I'll, I don't know, I'll get a buzz cut. If that exact thing
Clip that.
happens, I'll get a buzz cut, but I mean exact,
Yeah,
down
yeah,
to,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
42-40 being a play-in, not just, like, makes the
Yeah,
playoffs, that they has to be exact.
I got you. I got you. We will remember that
You
though,
can hold me
Ethan.
to it, I'll do it.
We'll hold you to it. But yeah, I would love if those things happened. But just to close out the show here, blah blah blah. Always in the comments, we appreciate
Mm.
it, man. He says, I would like to see Mamu more in the small forward role. I think he can defend a lot of slower small forwards, and yet we rarely see him in that position. Especially with Barnes or Keldon on the floor, that would work. I mean, you could maybe see a world defensively where you got Keldon kind of maybe playing more of the four as we've seen in the past, and him and Mamu are kind of switching out there. But I'm definitely not opposed to that. That's kind of why I brought up versatility and talked about him playing the three on the Georgian national team.
Mhm.
Um, but I think just because of the nature of the roster, we're probably going to see him more at the four. But I definitely get what you're getting at, and if he's playing on the floor with Barnes or Keldon, like there's definitely some switchability there.
I think there will be a lot of creative, lineups this season, and at the end of the day, we probably won't know who's playing what position. It'll just be a matchup decision, right? It's who
Right.
they're
Hmm.
defending that I guess gives away their position. But if we had a lineup out there with Jeremy, Mamu, Harrison, Devin, Stefan, that's just making something up. Who's playing the 3? Who's playing the 4? Who's playing the 5? Like
Right.
we really don't know. I guess Mamu's playing the 5 in that situation, but there's a lot of versatility, is what I'm getting at.
The vision that just kind of popped into my head here is we were talking about Jeremy kind of playing the dunker's role on offense and that Aaron Gordon role,
Mhm.
maybe on the floor with Keldon because of I mean, we're gonna really hope that Keldon's three gets better, but maybe you'd want to play Keldon kind of in that Aaron Gordon
Yeah.
role and have Mamu on the perimeter more as like a small forward. So I totally get what blah 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 is saying there. We got to wait until training camp and
Mm.
see how it all plays out. But this is going to be the last comment. I hope this doesn't start a war. But Nate says, how about them Texas State Bobcats? Hashtag take back Texas. I was actually at that game this weekend with a couple of buddies who were UTSA grads and also Spurs fans. That's the most important thing. And man, that was I was hoping it would be a better game, but definitely the Bobcats finally got one, Ethan. They finally got one.
It's about time, Jude. I think back to the game that we lost when our kicker missed that field goal. I was sitting in
We were in
the
school.
we were in
Yeah.
school. I was sitting in the engineering room, not the engineering room. The what do we call the room with the all the we were actually on the
Oh, the
controls.
studio.
The studio. God,
Yeah, you're
I
good.
was in the studio and I was sitting there listening to the call, and I was like, "Oh my god, he missed it." You know, it's funny that guy, the kicker.
Uh-huh.
No disrespect to this guy, he's a good dude. I actually knew him. He was in my class the next day.
Oh, no, man. That's
Luckily, no one
tough.
really liked football.
Yeah. It wasn't turned like it was now. Yeah.
Yeah, at the time, so, like, nobody gave him any crap for it, but I was like, "Oh, poor guy."
Yeah. But anyways, if you guys don't know what we're referring to, college football, the Texas State Bobcats, which is where me and Ethan went to school, beat the UTSA Roadrunners, which is the University of Texas at San Antonio. I know we have a lot of international listeners now, so
Ah,
just kind of wanted to put that out there so y'all know what we're talking about. It was a total slacking. I kind of, as much as it was happy to see that Texas State won because I was there in person. I
mm,
kind of would have liked to see a little bit more of a competitive game. But shout out to Texas State.
shout out indeed.
Let's see. Oh my goodness. Oh boy. Wemby's Castle. We love you, man. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show, and we will be back next week, finally talking about Victor Wembanyama. And here's the other thing, Ethan. After that, we will be officially 1 week away, or it'll be after next week's episode. It'll be 2 weeks away from training camp, but we'll have one more episode left before we're actually on a week of like where preseason basketball games will be played. So after next week, when we talk about the Sinners, Wemby, Charles Bassey, and of course Zach Collins, we will be doing our season predictions, Ethan. It will be time to talk about this. Have gone through all the position breakdowns, and you guys have been asking forever. We'll finally, be saying, okay, here's what we think our record's going to be. Here's how we think the season's going to go. And then after that, it won't be season preview content anymore, Ethan. It will be Spurs basketball time.
Yes, sir. It's about darn time.
Okay. I got to put this one last one up here. July 26th says, do the roar, Bobcat roar, Ethan.
Roar, Bobcat roar. I don't even remember that one.
I think he's just messing with you.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't think that's. The only thing I know is
he wanted you to be like the wow. They play it in the stadium.
You know what I do every single time someone asks me what college I went to?
What do you say?
I go, I went to Texas State. Go Bobcats, baby. And without fail,
no roar.
They go, what? You're like, the what? The what?
Big dogs.
Yeah, we're the dogs, bro. The Bobcats.
I love it. We appreciate all you guys hanging out. If you just got in, we apologize, but go check it out. We talked about Sandro Mamukelashvili, Jeremy Sochan, and Keldon Johnson wearing number 0 next season. And we'll be back next week to talk about our beloved Victor Wembanyama and Charles Bassey and Zach Collins. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks so much for coming in and hanging out with us. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below. And if you want to stay updated with all of our content, be sure to follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Go